First message of the day. It says, bring back Suella Braverman. I hope you've missed me as much as I have missed you, and I derive no pleasure whatsoever from returning during a period of such upset and turmoil. And once again, we find ourselves deriving absolutely no pleasure from having been among the tiny, perhaps, minority of people who feared that this sort of thing was on the horizon. I think of all the shows that we've dedicated to what the end game would be, or where the kind of rhetoric deployed by prominent public figures in the media and indeed in politics, where it would lead. And the reason why we know where it would lead on this programme is because we do, perhaps not as much as we used to, but we do talk to people who would be adjacent to the sort of characters that we saw this weekend trying to burn down hotels containing asylum seekers, setting fire to libraries, looting shops, attacking police officers, launching themselves at individuals who looked different from them with venomous fury. We have spoken to some of these people over the years, perhaps not the people who would actually pull on a balaclava helmet and go out to terrorise a community, in the case of Southport, already reeling from the grim murders of three little girls, one of whom, of course, was the daughter of immigrants. That's something I'm surprised to see has been somewhat overlooked in an awful lot of the coverage. You have the son of people born elsewhere embarking upon a murderous frenzy, and one of his victims is the daughter of people born elsewhere, but the problem apparently is people born elsewhere. Perhaps we can riddle that one a little bit later. I'm going to talk to you, I think, first about a few of the phone calls we've taken over the years, because I've been on a journey. Dreadful word, that. When I started in this job about 20 years ago, I wasn't particularly engaged in these matters. I was familiar with sort of the National Front. My dad had covered it for the Daily Telegraph in the 1970s and the 1980s. Nick Griffin was bubbling around. I think Farage was still a bit of a fringe figure. And I never really knew that this kind of thing was bubbling under the surface of our society all the time. I knew about the Notting Hill race riots, particularly after I moved to West London and got involved in Carnival. And by got involved in Carnival, I mean got on one on an annual basis. I didn't have any particular role to play or any volunteer type status. But I found out more about it. I have a little bit of history. I know as a Catholic that the Gordon riots in, I think, the 18th century were dedicated to the belief that Catholics were somehow responsible for all the country's ills. I know that Jewish people have been on the end of that particular accusation for centuries in almost all corners of the world. Latterly, in this country, Muslims have come in for the blame whenever anything awful happened. And indeed, they somehow got the blame when the Welsh-born Christian son of two people born in Rwanda committed terrible murders. The speed with which people were keen to blame Muslims, partly as a consequence of liars on social media, something else we've talked about a lot on this programme, was almost supersonic. And they never back down, really, these people. They can't. Their lives, their entire careers, of course, have been built upon inciting precisely the sort of violence that we saw this weekend. And it will be minutes, if they haven't done it already, before they start claiming that they warned against it. The people who said we need more robust responses. We need to be tougher on people. We need to get our country back. That's a particularly vicious phrase that I think we'll dig into a little bit later. They've incited these scenes. Make no mistake, calling people, human beings, seeking asylum, having fled war zones and tragedy, calling them illegals, the most dehumanizing of terms, having lecterns, displaying the phrase, stop the boats, public figures calling for people crossing the channel in flimsy dinghies to be sort of left to drown. People in Parliament now who have subscribed to some of the grimmest rhetoric I can ever remember hearing. We know, everybody knows. I tell you what, something that possibly gets missed, they know. You can tell by the way they wriggle. I think Farage this morning is trying to blame it on the policing of Black Lives Matters protests, which of course happened during lockdown and did not contain anything like the attacks upon entirely innocent people that we've seen over the course of this weekend. They know. And they can't. Where are they going to go? What are they going to do? People who've been feeding bile into the public bloodstream for decades about people born in other countries. It doesn't matter that they marry them, have children with them, speak foreign with them. It doesn't matter. It works. It's a business model. It's a career plan. It's a path to profit. And this is what happens. This is what happens. This is terrorism. These are pogroms. These are attacks upon wholly innocent people for the crime of having been born somewhere else, or having different coloured skin from you, or having different coloured skin from the people who are attacking them. So I'm going to run through a few things that have happened to me over the years. There's a moment many years ago. I don't know whether you remember it. I think it was before we started clipping things. John in Hounslow. And I've been looking at Hounslow today, bizarrely, because it's my home borough where plenty of asylum seekers are housed, including in leafy Chiswick, where I used to live. But Hounslow published a report at the end of last year describing the unacceptable conditions that asylum seekers face when they are put up in hotels. We may have a little look at that later. But I always remember John in Hounslow because it was the conversation that they always tell you that they're not allowed to have. He literally said to me on the programme, we're going back, 15 years maybe, I think? Was it in this building or the old building? I can't remember. He said, you can't say what you want in this country about immigration without being called a racist. I said, go on, mate, say it. I promise I won't call you a racist. And he said, OK, Hounslow's full of Pakistanis and they smell. Well, I think, actually, no, he said, Hounslow's full of Pakistanis. I said, well, what's wrong with that? He goes, they smell. And I thought, oh, Lord. This was in the days before the programme was sort of sometimes making the news rather than simply reporting it. So I felt a little bit of a frisson of fear that possibly this invitation to him to say whatever he wanted to say about immigration was something I'd come to regret. And I said, what do they smell of, John? And he said, curry. I thought, what the hell do I say now? So a long pause on the programme, kind of pause that gives Keith the heebie-jeebies because he thinks the emergency tape might kick in. And it wasn't me being clever. It was me desperately thinking what question to ask him next. They smell of curry, don't they? So I said, do you like curry, John? And he said, yes, James. A couple of years later, I took a call from a woman who was furious about immigration, very much a sort of UKIP creation. And she told me, and again, I still wasn't massively engaged in these kind of issues. She told me that immigrants got given free shops where she lived. Free shops, or £20,000 each to open shops. And I remember thinking, that can't be right, can it? Maybe there's a sort of kernel of truth in it. Maybe there's a kind of scheme somewhere to help people from particularly difficult backgrounds set themselves up in. I could say maybe there's a grant. And I didn't have the facts at my fingertips. I didn't let it slide exactly, but I asked her for proof. I asked her for some sort of evidence, and of course there wasn't any. And then I looked into it afterwards, and it was complete nonsense. But she believed it. She believed it, that people born overseas were getting a better deal than she was. They were getting lots of free stuff. And then not long ago, I think it was possibly only last year, was it? We took a call from someone who at the beginning sounded quite sensible, said she shared a lot of my views. Sometimes my radar bleeps a bit, and I think this is slightly not as it initially appears. And then she told me that her friends in the council had told her that all the immigrants got free cars, all the asylum seekers got free cars. And I thought, well, how do you prove that wrong? Especially if it's all over your Facebook feed, if you're reading this every day, if your feed is full of it. How do you prove it wrong? How do you know? How do you demonstrate to someone? They see a brown face driving a car, which of course was grounds for getting attacked in some towns in this country this weekend. A brown face behind the wheel of a car, that was sufficient grounds for physical attacks, vicious, violent physical attacks. But don't call them far right, whatever you do. Just concerned citizens trying to kick the living daylights out of people who have done absolutely nothing wrong. attacking homes, attacking shops, attacking libraries, attacking hotels, attacking citizens' advice bureaus in some of the parts of the country where citizens need advice more than they do almost anywhere else. But don't call them 5-star. Don't call them far right. So you can't prove that they haven't got free cars. You can give all the evidence you want, but people choose to believe it. And then there was a call that you may remember. It wasn't that long ago. A fella convinced, absolutely adamant, nowhere near London, lived at the other end of the country, but he knew for a fact that Sadiq Khan had introduced Sharia law in 2 London boroughs and was very keen to do it again. We did it live on air. We spoke to him live on air and showed him the error that he had made, showed him the source of the lie that he had believed. In fact, the original post described Shakira law, which is, it would be funny if it wasn't so tragic. And we showed him in real time, live on the radio, this is not true. So give me another reason for holding the views that you hold. And he hadn't got anything, but he didn't go away. He didn't go away having abandoned those views. So you build an opinion about Islam, immigration, refugees, asylum seekers. You build an opinion based on falsehoods and lies, exaggerations and embellishments. And when you are shown that what you believe is not true, you don't change your mind. You don't change your mind at all. I don't know how you deal with that. And then the hotels. I've seen some clips that have popped up on this radio station in the last couple of weeks about asylum seekers apparently being in 4-star and 5-star hotels. They're just not. They are just not. Farage started that as well, driving around with his Fisher-Price binoculars, filming himself going into buildings that used to be hotels and are now asylum centres, and claiming that they were receiving 4-star treatment. You imagine checking in to a 4-star hotel and finding out that the 5 people in the next room reheating their frozen meals in a microwave that was the level of service you were going to get. It's simply not true. Things that are not true. And yet people believe them. And that's why today we've got a problem. We've got a problem because you don't know how to tell the difference between the people who believe things that are not true and the people who just don't care. They can't wait for the opportunity to throw burning torches at hotels full of foreigners. They can't wait for the opportunity to help themselves to mobile phones and Croc shoes and trainers. They're just not there for any even vaguely racist or even political reasons. But they march alongside the people who are. And how do you tell the difference? How many of these people are susceptible to the truth? How many are susceptible to the facts? How many of these people, when they claim that living in a Holiday Inn Express is somehow the lap of luxury, how many of them, when they discover the reality of these scenarios, will go, actually, do you know what? Maybe that's not the thing I should be angriest about today. How much money, for example, was funneled into the pockets of Tory party donors during the PPE scandals? Yeah, I don't care about that. They can buy yachts, but if there's a fella over there getting some crumpets for free, then I'm bloody furious because he's brown. I don't know how many can be brought back to something that once represented normality in this country. My local council, the London Borough of Hounslow, did a report at the end of last year into what life was like in these sorts of hotels. And the findings were pretty damning. It looked at the mental health impacts of the cramped living conditions, the poor food nutrition, the lack of privacy, the lack of health care, the lack of mother and baby provision, and much, much more. The cost of dealing with some of the physical and mental health consequences of this will dwarf the cost of the original accommodation. The safeguarding issues are off the charts. Depression, suicide ideation, gestational diabetes due to poor nutrition, risk of domestic and or sexual abuse. One case study highlighted a 4-year-old child who'd become so withdrawn that they couldn't leave the hotel room. The health professionals consulted suggested the child was suffering at the age of 4 from clinical depression. And what happened to people like that this weekend? They looked out of the window of their substandard unhealthy accommodation, and they saw people drawing their fingers across their throat in one case, or lobbing burning missiles in others, screaming abuse, trying to block doors. Trying to block doors because they fear that their identity is being eroded. They fear that British values are under threat. And the phrase I think that best explains what happened this weekend is the phrase that Lee Anderson took to spouting relatively recently after arriving in his third political party, having been a Labour politician and a Conservative politician and now a Reform UK Limited politician. A party, by the way, in which 20% of its serving MPs have served prison time for assaulting a British woman. 1 in 5 MPs in Nigel Farage's party has served prison time for assaulting a British woman. Farage himself, of course, married to an immigrant, which makes his children the children of immigrants, just like all the children of immigrants that we're supposed to be hating on at the moment. That phrase, I want my country back, we never talked about it on the show. And we probably should have done. The reason why we didn't talk about it on the show was because it's a bit of a Pandora's box, isn't it? What do you mean you want your country back? I think that phrase gives permission to people, possibly people who are a bit hard of thinking, if you prefer to see it that way. But it gives permission to people to take back what they think has been taken from them. It hasn't been taken from them. There's a Labour MP, I'll play you the clip shortly. There's a Labour MP who was complaining about asylum seekers being housed in a Holiday Inn Express in Tamworth, I think in her first speech to the House of Commons. And a Holiday Inn Express in Tamworth was attacked by racists this weekend. It was the subject of another pogrom, another attempt to terrorise or expel people based entirely upon their ethnicity or their origins. I mentioned that she's from the Labour Party because I don't think many people are blameless in the creation of the environment in which this stuff can happen. Some of them are obvious. Tommy Ten Names, the Spectator magazine, the Sun, the Daily Mail, Nigel Farage, Suella Braverman. Some of them are obvious, some of them less so. A Labour MP complaining because the people of Tamworth want their Holiday Inn back, she said. How many people check into the Holiday Inn that is in the town where they actually live on a regular basis? I don't know. Maybe I'm leading a desiccated life, not checking into the Holiday Inn in Brentford on a regular basis. We want our hotel back. 22 minutes after 10. So here we are. What I don't know is this. What I don't know is what you do with the people who say, I obviously abhor what's been done, but these people have got valid concerns. What do you do with them? The people who are doing the rioting, the people who are attempting to terrorise entirely innocent people, they go to jail, ideally for a very long time. But what do you do with the people who, are they in good faith? When they say, the ones who say, I disapprove of the tactics, but they've got a point. Because they haven't got a point. They believe that people are living in the lap of luxury, that immigrants get free shops and free cars, and that Sadiq Khan is introducing Shakira law, and that these hotels are on a par with Claridge's, and a lap of luxury is available to absolutely all of them. So they don't have a point. But what do you do with the people who say that they do? How robust should we be with the people in public life who have given permission to these pogromists, who have given permission to these racists, the people who have said, go and get your country back? Because if you say, I want my country back, you are saying, go and get it. Go and get it. I think Anderson claimed that a travel lodge in his own constituency was full of asylum seekers and then had to backtrack humiliatingly when it emerged that actually it was a bunch of nurses who'd checked in for a little holiday, a little break from looking after us. Foreign-looking, mind, of course. That's a crucial point. So is there such a thing as legitimate concerns in this case? And if there is, and I'm far from convinced that there are, if there are such a thing as legitimate concerns, what's the relationship between them and the rioters, between them and the potential killers, them and the pogromists, them and the race, the violent racists, the looters? What's the relationship between them? And I mean, listen, I'm overloading you with questions today. This always happens when I've been away for a while, but rarely do I return to such scenes as the ones that we've all witnessed in the last couple of days. How do we have this conversation? So I'm pretty sure that this has happened because we've given too much space to the inciters. We've given too much space to the dividers. We've given too much space. We've given them season tickets on Question Time. We've given them their own television stations. We've given them newspaper columns and magazine columns. We've given them radio shows. And yet still they claim that they're marginalised or silenced. Still they claim that they're frozen out of public discourse, that their concerns are ignored, and therefore it is inevitable, if I disapprove, but it is inevitable that people are trying to burn down hotels containing children, innocent children. I don't know how you have that conversation, because they're calling for more. We need more attention. We need more space. We need more television shows. We need more appearances on Question Time. I don't know that that's the right answer. I really don't. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Tell me how you think we should conduct this conversation. Do you think I'm going to stop talking today? It's 25 minutes after 10. What's the record, Keith? 27. Well, I don't feel like breaking it today.